panelists here with us tonight who were able to jump in on this in about 5 or 6 days notice, some of them a little bit less. And we're excited to get started for the semester. For all the attendees joining, if you were not with us last year, I'm Emma Goldberg. I'm now a 5th-year PhD student, 5th and final, in the Department of Physiology.
And I am Zoe Terwilliger. I am a now 3rd-year PhD student in the Department of Physiology. Definitely not 3rd and final. But we're so excited to be continuing with Grad Pirate Talks. We enjoyed putting this on so much last year and got so much good feedback from it, and felt like it was a good outlet for a lot of graduate students as well as faculty and staff to kind of come and, share concerns, share stories, share history. We got to learn so much history that I had never known about, and learn a lot of perspectives and thoughts that I had honestly never considered before. And we're excited to be continuing to put together a space to have those kinds of discussions and have those kinds of presentations for us all to learn more about each other and our history and our present, which can sometimes be even more confusing.
And for those who don't know, Grad Pirate Talks it's an acronym for promoting inclusion through research, action, teaching, and education, to spell pirate, which makes sense. We take no credit for it. Our co-chair who graduated last fall came up with all of that, and it's been really good. And we like to put on these types of panels and talks to give students a place to talk about the ongoings of history and the world. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Before we introduce and really let our panelists all introduce their wonderful selves, we always like to start by reading the land acknowledgement statement that was adopted by, oh my gosh, SGA. Reading is going to be hard today too. It's important to remember that this land was stolen and that colonization is an ongoing process, and therefore we must take steps to bring forgotten histories into our shared collective consciousness. All right, ready? We acknowledge the Tuscarora people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live, and recognize their continuing connection to the land, water, and air that Greenville consumes. We pay respect to 8 recognized tribes: Kohari, Eastern Band of Cherokee, Hollywa-Saponi, Lumbee, Meherrin, Occaneechi Band of Saponi, Saponi, and Waccamaw-Siouan. All nations and their elders, past, present, and emerging. And one of the cool things we got to learn, cool as in just interesting thing to learn, is that Valerie, one of our 2 really amazing ASL interpreters here with us tonight, and most nights that we're up, have to spell out all of the tribes letter by letter. So we try and go through it slowly enough that they can keep up with us. And that being said,
things we had never considered. And by the way, we do have these 2 incredible interpreters with us tonight. Incredible and patient, might I add. Valerie and Jet, if you require interpretation, please pin their boxes to your screen. They're really incredible, and it's been amazing to work with Valerie, and we're so excited to work with Jet. I think they're going to kind of tag team the talk, particularly because I know us 2, we talk very quickly. So just kind of switch between pins as they trade off.
Or pin them both.
There
should be room for everyone up top.
With that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. As usual, we're going to kind of give a general disclaimer that anything that we say that may, we're not perfect as much as we like to think that we are. So if we misspeak or say something incorrect or something that you find offensive, please let us know. We're definitely still learning, and those things can happen, and we need to know about them so that we can make the proper apologies and proper corrections.
Also, all of our panelists here with us tonight, which will all do a much better job of introducing themselves than we could ever hope to do, are speaking from their own experiences, their own feelings, stories, thoughts. And so it's reflective of them as individuals. And we want this to be a safe, and it is a safe space for all of us to be sharing our thoughts that are reflective of us. So with that, we are so excited to have Brandi, Belle, and Quinton joining us tonight, and we'll go ahead and let you all introduce yourselves.
Yes, please do. Name, program,
pronouns,
anything about your background that you feel is going to be pertinent to this discussion. Please share.
Brandi, if you want to start us off.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandi Doubt. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a second year MSW student. So this is my last year. I'm very excited about that. I would consider myself a non-binary, gender fluid, obviously Black human being. I have experience in being in like a PWI. My undergrad was Meredith. And I'm constantly the person in the room, like kind of airing out my grievances, kind of pointing out when things are uncomfortable. So I feel like I'm a good person to talk to about this. I would say that I'm also queer. So yeah, a lot of identities. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Belle, if you want to go next.
Belle, if you're speaking, you are muted. Okay, we'll come back. Quinton, if you're with us.
Yes, I'm with you. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So my name is Quinton Jones. I am a ECU graduate. I graduated actually in May with a computer science degree. But unfortunately, I got elected as the MPHC president in the spring. So I took on a second degree to kind of keep that presidency because I felt the need for someone like me to, be in the position that I am. And I guess you guys are going to hear later in this talk of why. I am currently doing software engineering as a degree. I am a software engineer. I work for LexisNexis, which is like a legal software company for politics and lawyers and stuff. I'm also an Air Force veteran. Majority of my time has been spent overseas. Most of my adult life has been overseas, besides for being here at ECU. So I am also in Iota Phi Theta fraternity incorporated. Pronouns, I don't really care what you say. I don't have any preference or anything, but I'm very respectful for others and they, her, or she, or him pronouns that they have. I'm an open-minded person, and I'm hoping I'm giving enough time for my other panelists to get their stuff in order so they can speak right after me. So I'm done.
I think you're like us. We could talk about ourselves for some reason forever. And it's not because we think we're great or exciting at all. It's just, we could just go on and on.
It's a little bit like Brandi said, like airing grievances of things, right? It just like kind of
complaints
falls into that.
So our other panelist, Belle, is having some audio issues with your internet connection. So we are going to let them leave and join back in, and then we will take a quick break for an introduction midway through. Hopefully it'll get sorted out before we're done. But if not, we have a great between the two of us and our current two panelists that are here with us, we are excited to have a really great discussion.
Yes, and as we get into it, all attendees, if you have any questions or contributions, please share them in the chat or Q&A box. We would love to contribute those to the discussion. And, you know, we don't always come up with the most brilliant of questions. I am not a journalist. So please put those in, because I think any contributions to the discussion are very helpful. With that, we're going to kick things off with our first question.
Yeah, so we're going to start off, and for everyone who's here as an attendee, I'm sure you've read the title of tonight's panel. The goal tonight is to really talk about institutional responses to any type of discriminatory incident, an institution being a business, a place of work, a university, just any type of institution. So our questions are going to kind of focus on these responses. So to start us off, what have your experiences in institutions been when it comes to discrimination or feeling accepted? And either of you are welcome to just jump in. It is a very casual discussion.
I guess I'll start. It hasn't been the best experience for me from a university standpoint. At Meredith, I had an issue with a teacher who used the word colored to refer to people. And I was very shocked by that. And I went to my head up person, and she was a Black woman. And she's like, well, what we can do is we can tell her that you want to have a conversation with her, like, and we'll be there. And I was like, well, she's a lead person in my program, and I don't really feel comfortable saying that to her. I'm already in her class, and I feel like I'm going to have a lot of classes with her. And that was the only thing that she could do for me, like, oh, we can have a conversation with her about it, and you'll be present. And it kind of felt very like, the onus was on me to say, like, what you said was inappropriate because of X, Y, and Z. So I didn't really feel supported by my university when it came to that situation. I really feel like it's important. Me being in the student position, I think power dynamics are really important when dealing with discrimination. And she has tenure; she's been there forever. So I think someone on the same power scale would have been more appropriate, other than just like me, because she said it to like 30 children, well, not children, 30 students in a room. So she wouldn't have known who would have called her out. But if my face is in it, then I would feel like it'd be a large problem.
Right, we totally agree. I know I've heard of a lot of experiences of that, and particularly at PWIs, which for those that don't know is predominantly white institutions. It can be, there's a lot of those kind of rules and regulations where they're like, okay, yeah, we'll have you sit down with the person and us to talk about it. Or even if they're like, we'll just talk about it and let them know that that event was not right. But if you're in a predominantly white institution, a lot of the times you are the only person of color or Black person or anything in a room. So it's obvious who the complaint is coming from. And either way, you're going to be spotlighted, which
is kind of the opposite of what you want almost. And we talked about this a lot last year too, is it's putting all of the responsibility on the student who now feels unsafe and unsupported to make it better and make it right, which is not, you were already in such an awful, uncomfortable, upsetting environment or circumstance, and now you have to basically go relive it in front of that same person, and that just doesn't.
And in general too, as as a person in a marginalized group too, there's often this guilt that you feel to make the other person that kind of committed this offense feel comfortable with the fact that you're uncomfortable with it, and you're asked to do all of those things in one instant, which can be very overwhelming. Quinton, do you have anything to add?
Well, it's weird because majority of my time in the Air Force, if we're still talking about like any type of institution, that word, it's very institutionally. I made that up. Um, my time in the Air Force was very interesting. I was the HR manager, and a lot of the time I saw kind of the bad things that happened. So, not to give too much detail into it, but this particular incident that was like one of many, um, I would see, minority airmen do something bad, per se, bad, um, and then I would see a white airman do the exact same thing, and the differences in punishments were bad. Sorry for the dogs. The differences in punishments were crazy. Like it would be like the Air Force was trying to destroy one airman on one side, and then on the other side, they were just, oh, they're not that type of person. They would never, like, they won't do it again. It was like they were going through some kind of rough time, or they would come up with every little excuse of why this person, it wasn't like this person. But when it was a minority person, it was, oh no, that's them. That's the type of people. I've been trying to say he's been like this the whole time he was there. Um, they don't care about his family or what. I mean, the person could have just had a baby, could have had a lot of life things happen, and it doesn't matter. But on the other side, they could have been just a single airman living their best life, wanting to do whatever they wanted to, and it was just treated, you know, like, oh, it would never happen again. That's not them type of thing. So a lot of times in the military, well, in the Air Force, that's what I ran into. And a lot of times I would speak up about it. Um, and I can say that caused more problem than it helped a lot of times, especially for me. Um, but I'm not the type of person that can be quiet. So when I see misdoings, no matter how much it's going to cost me, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say something, regardless if it costs me my job or even my life. So that's the type of person I am. But yes, taking that and bringing it to ECU and the knowledge that I've had and the struggles that I had in the Air Force. Um, the difference being that when I see things at ECU, like I've heard, teachers using wrong terminology. I've heard students say, I've heard an organization here on campus about multiple different people in who don't know each other, including my family, who don't know each other, have been said at a certain organization when they walk past their house that they've been called niggers. So I don't know if y'all can bleep that out or whatever, but I'm just gonna be real. But they've been called that, and I've even talked to. Well, we'll get into that later when you ask about how the responses go. But I I've seen so many racial issues and heard about so many different experiences, even by being the MPHC president, of the recent things that went down with the Yik Yak talk chat about the No Blacks Allowed. Um, it's really hurting, to be honest. Like, I'm beyond angry, but it's really hurting, and it's because I have to do something in me that is really hurts the most, because I feel like, why don't everybody else see this? Or why am I the only one like really standing up for a lot of this stuff? So yes, there has been a lot of racial issues, and not just race. I've had people come to me, females recently this year, which has been a fluctuation of, women who have, weight on them. and they have been told that they can't get in certain frat parties, or they've been um told different things like that, not being allowed to get in parties, or people been discriminated against for that. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, again, we're all the same, just being able to have all of these different, experiences and things. And I think it is important that when we talk about discriminatory incidents, right, like you kind of hinted on, it's not always, doesn't always have to be in terms of race, but it could be in terms of size or religion or age, gender identity, any of that, sexual orientation, any of those things.
Cultural practices. The list is truly endless.
It really is. So I'm glad that you were able to kind of bring that piece in, because I think we're so focused. And then you did also hint, we have some questions coming up about different circumstances, I guess, that have occurred just at a few different campuses.
Yes, and you also made another really good point about kind of the levels of I guess what's the word? Being reprimanded, right, that you've seen between individuals of different races or different backgrounds. And I think that's a really good point, and kind of something that is behind, even if you hate the term that we use, institution, is because the thing about institutions is that we're hopefully working to make all of them more diverse and more equitable and more inclusive, because those implicit biases that people don't recognize behind, certain individuals getting reprimanded is all because of that lack of diversity and that lack of inclusion. And it's hard because, you're like, how do people not see this? And it's just built into the system that way. If people of color or people of, different
religious
backgrounds, gender identities and things are not in positions of power. And I think that's a really, really important point.
Well, to add to that, I wanted to put this out there too, because this is something I want the live people to hear and really think about. They probably have some questions for it, but this is something amazing happened last week at the Pirate Roundtable. So ALE, the alcohol law enforcement people, came to the campus, and they came to talk to the Pirate Roundtable. So first off, when I look around in the room, it's only like 3 black people. Like, so, it's cool. We are at PWI. It's cool. But what happened next was very hilarious to me. Because they came in and they hit us with this big statistic. Well, they weren't even statistics. There were stats. Like East Carolina and Greenville alone had like 280 some false IDs, right? Like in the last, I guess, since April to then was their physical year or something. So it was like an outrageous number compared to the rest of the state. Like even the big cities, Charlotte, Raleigh, Greensboro, right? So they were talking to us about this, and I'm just sitting there in my head like, this is a really big problem. I wonder what I can do to help. So I asked the question, hey, what is the demographics behind this? And he looked at me weirdly and said, are you talking about like what school year they're in? And I'm like, no. Are they black, white, women, males? Like, what's the demographic? So he said, majority of them are, well, all of them are white. Majority of them are women, and the rest are men. So then I said, interesting. So what is the punishment right now? Well, they go to the DA, and the first time it's like more of a slap on the wrist type of thing. Like, yeah, you did it. Don't do it again. We're gonna give you some. We're gonna take your license, or they might take your license for maybe a certain amount of time, or something they might do. Or if you have a good lawyer, you probably get out of it. And then I asked, okay, how about the second time? He says, well, the second time I've told them, lay the hammer on them because I don't want them to do it again. Okay. But he said, but it's crazy because I've had people not do it twice, but 3 times. And it's become a recurring thing. So I'm like, interesting too. And then I asked, so do you notify the school? And he says, no, when you have 50 something people a night that we're catching with people, we don't have time to notify the school. Okay. Now, I say all this to bring up a great point. So, false identification is a felony crime, right? You go to China, get somebody, do you a fake ID, you wait all this time, you spend the money to do this, to get your stuff, and then you go to clubs where the fake ID. So, like, bet. I've heard people on campus that were in the dorms smoking weed and get kicked out of school, records, court, all this other stuff. But you're telling me that there are 200 and something people out there right now who still go to this school, who've committed felonies, who got a slap on the wrist by the DA, and you telling me the only thing that is going to get them is that they have criminal records? That's false, because I know everybody, their mom knows your first little hiccup that you do, you get a little expungement if you got the money to do so, and then you don't have a criminal record anymore. So when we're talking about how this university treats and reprimands people, it is a very big difference, and that is a real life today example of how we are being treated. So
Yeah,
I
no,
wanted to put that out
absolutely.
there.
And I think there are endless examples of unfair or different and unfair responses to crimes or any type of issues, depending on the person's, again, race, gender identity, backgrounds in general.
And it spans through most institutions. It's definitely, and unfortunately not unique to us. It's everywhere.
Absolutely, and it's something that we see, and of course our experiences are mainly from this area and from ECU, at least what we're talking on tonight. But it definitely is a very big systemic issue. For the sake of time, we're going to try and move into our next couple of questions, just so that we don't take up everyone's entire evening. Doesn't matter to you. So we're gonna try and keep them maybe like to 3 to 5 minute answers for this round, just so we can get some questions from the audience too. So in a time where there is some type of discriminatory incident, do you know of any good or effective responses? Or I guess what would you deem as a good, an effective or an appropriate response?
Have you seen or heard of any, or have you thought of something that you're like, I really wish they had done this about a problem that happened?
Yeah, and again, we'll try and keep our answers a little bit curt, enough to get our big important points, but between like 3-5 minutes, just so we can get through some questions.
I know you don't have to name names. You don't have to call out specifics. You can just, be vague.
Yeah.
I'll go. Can you hear me this time?
Oh, I was like, who is that? I was like, that doesn't sound like Brandi. It's like,
Sorry, I was having technical difficulties.
Well, can you introduce yourself and then yes.
Yeah, so I'm Belle. Sorry for the voice. I'm kind of sick. But I am a second semester grad student in the exercise and sports psychology concentration. I went to ECU and Wingate University for my undergrad, where I studied exercise physiology and religious studies. Yes, none of those connect to each other, but they're fun. So I guess it was more of like a personal experience. So I do identify as an openly queer individual, and I go by she, her pronouns. My hair is very short and very masculine presenting. I was in a class at ECU in my undergrad, and I won't name names, but I was wearing a hat that day, and one of my professors misidentified me as a he, him. And I in those situations, I'd like to take that as like an education part where I was like, well, actually, sir, she, her, I'm a female. And instead of correcting himself and apologizing, he was like, oh, it was the hat. You looked like a little boy. So it's situations like that where if I would prefer that like a professor, somebody in power would take that time to at least have a conversation with me outside of just further insulting me in front of the class. Um, Thankfully, I had a conversation with him after. He's still kind of an asshat, no offense. But I'm hoping situations like that educate people, and then in the end, they change how they talk and refer to everyone. But you can only do so much individually. Some people are just jerk offs. But I do think it takes a part of, if you're one of the people that's being discriminatory against, you need to take your initiative to educate those people. And in return, hopefully they can pass down and educate others and correct themselves. But I think that's the overall picture. We have to learn from each other and we can't just pass blame. And I think that's how we're going to grow overall, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I do, at least for, I guess, a first infraction of someone, agree with trying to take it as an educating them like you did, instead of completely calling them out right away, depending on, I'm sure, the situation and your own personal personality and feelings towards things, and I guess the extent of it and how much it affects you so individually. But it is about education, and that's something that we also try to do, which is why we open up all the time with if we say something wrong.
And one of the reasons we like to do this is because personally, as a Black woman, I'm tired of trying to educate people in my everyday life. So, a lot of times when those things happen, I'm like, I'm too exhausted to take the mental, emotional, spiritual drain out of my day and my time, which I should be paid for, and to educate someone else that should do homework themselves to figure out that what they say is wrong. And, that's why we kind of hope that this helps a little bit so that people will realize, oh, that's something I should apologize for. Good to know. Should they know that already? Yes. But we're here to help, and we're all here to learn and grow from each other. Like you said, it's not something, we're not born with that knowledge that that's something that's offensive to someone. So while it's definitely not the onus on you of the responsibility of explaining it to people, I hope that person is grateful that you took the time out of your life to do that and make them a better person.
Brandi?
So I with grad school, I have a lot of classes where it's like kind of seminar based. It's like a lot of conversations happening. And recently, last week, we talk about like field, and a lot of this is on like DSS, the Department of Social Services. So we see people like in their most vulnerable moments, and like going around the room, it's really easy to say like, oh, and this person drove drunk with their kids in the car, and this person did this, and it was kind of like just this grievance session, like an hour, and it got to me, and just kind of, if you're like feeling some sort of way, like you don't have to be the most like eloquent. I literally said like in a class, I'm like, it's really uncomfortable and it's really like low key pissing me off that everyone's like saying all these things about people that we don't really know them like that. And I left it like a few sentences, and I'm like, oh, like you can go, I'm done talking. And then the next week, the teacher was like, well, I was really thinking about last class, and I really want to make sure this is a safe environment, and like we're really professional and responsible. So like you can say something like just how you're feeling it, because if you're feeling it, most likely other people in the room are feeling uncomfortable, or at least they should be more mindful. And it just needs someone to speak up. And then I'm glad that my teacher gave that, like, oh, we should talk about this more. But in general, you should never like, I don't want to make it a safe place for people just to like say, I don't know, pass their judgment on people and discriminating against people that are more in poverty than us, like more like in very vulnerable situations. So it can be a safe place, but a YouTuber says this, it's a safe place, but you will get roasted. Like, don't be afraid to just be like, that's kind of gross.
and like just be and like let them, they can figure out like, how do I feel, like is that cool, and it will be uncomfortable, but it's like okay just to be like, that kind of sucks, you guys, like you don't have to go into a big speech. And normally like I just get like mad. I'm like, hey, let's think of like, I don't like this, just make sure people like more like aware, like, oh wait, like they are people, like we're not better than them. And it will be easy for people to kind of like jump on and be like, yeah, and then this happened. So if you're just a person to kind of break that cycle, it makes a good, and it's the effort. I think it's easier. It's an easier thing to do, I think, if you think about it like that.
Um,
Yeah.
we love to say, the things that are going on. I think that's something that works really well in our circle of, at least where we work/live at this point, is to be able to just kind of call things out as they're happening, to be like, yeah, that's not cool.
It's an important thing to do in any, particularly in your field for sure, but in any field, is to kind of humanize, the experience that you're talking about. Like, yes, you're talking about a story or, someone sharing something that happened, but like they're a person and you kind of constantly have to come back to that. And I think sometimes that's missed, even in our own lives,
Yeah.
and dealing with coworkers or bosses or whoever it may be. I think that's really important. Quinton, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, I don't. I'll save some time.
We have, like,
Very
where we're
succinct.
going somewhere in the future. Okay. One of our last ones from us, and then we have at least one panelist or at least one attendee question, and then one event that we kind of learned of today, and we'll get to. Oh, two. Okay, we're gonna do this one because I like this one a lot. This came in from one of our attendees. What is the most appropriate way to express anger when you feel discriminated against? Or I guess, what is, in your mind, the most appropriate way to express anger when you feel discriminated against?
Therapists everywhere are going to be calling in for this, I think. But if you all have any ways that you found that have worked or not worked, to be honest, yeah, with trying to keep a little bit like PC language.
So I'll keep this short. I feel like it depends on what do you want to do. So if you're the type of person that, I don't want to give my time and stress levels and emotions, spiritual aspect of yourself into that at that point, the best way to do is just walk away and, go home, scream about it in your car, play some music that's going to make you feel better or whatever. Um, if you feel like something needs to be done about it, um, to be honest with you, I would immediately take out some recording device. Um, and that seems to be working nowadays because everybody's getting, their Karen or whatever they may be. And once they get blasted, they feel, it'll destroy their life and things like that. And people don't want that to happen to them. So it usually changes their, probably not their thought process, but they know they probably won't say anything discriminating again. So, I mean, really, I think that's the only two things you can do that is positive. I mean, you can go the negative way and just throw hands, but nobody wants to do that. I don't recommend that because that goes nowhere. You're gonna hurt yourself. So those are just the two things that I came up with.
And I say funny, it's not funny, but we said something about this earlier today. I think that, if you do something like you pull out a recording, if you're saying something and then somebody immediately stops talking, it's like you knew what you were saying was wrong. Because if you don't want me to record what you're saying, then you clearly know that on some level, like, this is wrong and that you can't defend it. So I don't know, I kind of, if it's like an ongoing thing, I kind of love that a lot. Belle or Brandi?
Personally, I kind of like to go the more petty route. So say somebody like, I guess mine's the biggest thing is like mispronouns me or says something like super like, well, religion says blah blah blah. Because I got that a lot my freshman year at Wingate because it's a Baptist affiliated school. I'll say something like, well, bless your heart. I went the real petty route and got a degree in religious studies so I could like recite the Bible back to them. Also, like the best route I found is like you actually mispronoun them, and they're like, well, actually, they're like, no, I'm a sir, blah blah blah, and you're like, well, cool, I'm also a her, I'm a she, so it's not fun when somebody does it to you, right? So that's how I like to handle it. Is it the most mature way? Probably not, but it sure is fun sometimes.
I mean, you say mispronouncing, and yes, I guess, if we big picture, I guess it's petty, but also it's important sometimes to kind of put people in your shoes so that they know how you feel about things. And it's hard to do unless you do it in that kind of petty way. And it seems like you're instigating something, but really it's just, hey, this is how I feel. Have you ever considered it?
And mispronouncing, if it's just a genuine mistake, and it's something that we practice all the time, right, is a very simple apology of, I'm really sorry, I messed up, or and so again, if you are then getting so offended by being mispronounced yourself, then like it's probably something happening here. But being petty can be, it gets the job done sometimes.
I don't know if like a counselor would tell us the same thing, but it's sometimes, again, like it's the easiest way to get someone to know your experience.
Brandi, who I'm sure will be like, do not be petty. Is there anything you want to add?
I think like dealing with anger, like in the moment, just make sure that you're safe. There's so many ways that could go wrong, but I would really like channel like your anger into like activism if you have the time, because that's very time consuming. But if you can like change things or like state your grievance somewhere, it could be like an email or anything, just to kind of change how things are going. I think that's really important, to stand up for yourself, and however you're comfortable to do. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. Oh, go ahead.
You were. I don't really have that much more to add. I just think it is, for something that I would do is I sometimes feel like, so my family is Jewish as a background, and sometimes people here will wish me like happy holidays or enjoy the food on holidays that are supposed to be very somber, or you fast all day, and I am like, or they'll say things like, oh, I know this person that's Jewish, and you're like, we don't actually have conference calls every night, it's just not really a thing. But in all those situations, for me, I can say that I'm always too uncomfortable really to say anything in the moment. And a lot of times I've just always actually really let it slide, because I don't, I do care about the other person's feelings and responses back to it. And so I think that it can be really hard. And I also think that it's important to take the anger and make sure that it is like from a place where you can semi-articulate. And I think that's at least how I would try to respond, is like, where are my feelings? What are my words? And then come back to it when I'm not like seething.
Yeah, and going back to the guilt of what that person that offended you is feeling, that's a hard thing to tackle, and also something that we really shouldn't concern ourselves with tackling, since we're the people that are, being attacked in those moments. But for the attendee that asked that question, sparked this awesome discussion. I think letting others know that, this act of discrimination happened, I think is always a good thing to do, so that somebody knows, and if you don't record it in the moment, then there is some record and paper trail of that happening. Also, it can be hard when, we say act of discrimination, and it's not always a very offensive yik yak post. A lot of times it's the day-to-day stuff, the microaggressions, and those can be a lot harder to try to tackle, because it's, something that really people that have your same background are the only ones that are going to be able to relate to you, and that's really, really hard. And I think that's why it's so important within ECU and any institution, any other institution that we go to, once we hopefully one day graduate from here, to find a community. And it's important for these institutions to create that community, you know, to hire, retain people that are, you know, of marginalized backgrounds, you know, across the gambit, because that's going to develop a sense of camaraderie, and it's going to educate all other employees about some of these things, so that we don't, you know, say what happy Yom Kippur, like things that just are not correct.
And then when you do, right, if you do, you just say, oh, I didn't know. Sorry, thank you for telling me. Or like it doesn't always have to be this defense mechanism. And I think that that's also really important too, is if you tell somebody, hey, this or that was really offensive to me, and then they get defensive, it kind of dampens you wanting to step up ever again. We have another attendee question, and I would happily get through those instead of anything we prepared, because I like the interaction of it. So what would you recommend when it comes to stepping up if you're put in a tight spot or you're afraid to step up? So maybe, you know, you're not comfortable telling your boss or a professor or, you know, the owner of a business or something like that, that something that they said was offensive to you. What would you do, or how could you, you know, help somebody feel more comfortable stepping up and speaking out against it?
Repeat that one more time.
Yeah, so I know I said I turned the mic off and I was like, I said way too many words. The overarching question is, what would you tell somebody who is put in a tight or a hard spot? If they're trying to step up or speak out for themselves, what would you tell them to do? I didn't say it any better. Zoe will try next.
Did that clear it up at all?
Probably not.
It did.
Okay.
Okay, I guess I'll go.
Yeah.
See, I try to give people chances. When you speak up, you have to be aware of the consequences. Now, it shouldn't be consequences of speaking up, be honest with you. But unfortunately, a lot of times it is. So here's an example. So let's say that there is a crowd. Let's go back like a year and say, you know, you're in Greenville, it's a crowd of Trump supporters that are hanging out. They got their Confederate flags, everything going. And you see the Confederate flag and you're like, everything in your spirit is telling you, you know, you need to go say something. So you decide to go up and say something to this crowd of people. And you say, not anything against Trump, but you speak up directly against that flag. It can go two ways. They can agree with you and be like, I'm sorry for offending you, and put the flag away. Or, which they probably gonna most likely do, is telling you that it's part of their history. They don't care how you feel. If you don't like it, you can keep walking down the street because we're gonna do what we want to do anyway. And if you continue to press the situation, they're gonna continue to press you. So you have to be prepared when you speak up that that you speak in facts, because people on the other side are going to spit so-called facts as well to them. So you have to have your stuff together. You have to have whatever background about it together, even if you're in a classroom setting and you've seen somebody getting discriminated against. Like, you need to know exactly what you're getting into, the anything behind it. Maybe it was some kind of standing joke that you didn't know. Like, you need to know, because when you go and you speak up, there are consequences. That it can be good or it can be bad. People will say, hey, you're right, or people be like, nope, and get offended, and then it goes and turn into something. But that's just my 2 cents. Plenty of other cents I have, but I'll let other people talk.
I think that's great. I think it is really important when you are stepping up to know that it may not go the way that you want it to go. And I feel like that's something you learn in a lot of contexts of life is, when you try something, it may not work out the way that you plan it. You have to be kind of prepared for all of the ways it could go. Brandi or Belle?
I guess what helps me speak up is the other person's reaction is not my responsibility. It's my responsibility to say when I think something has gone like amiss, and that kind of frees me because I think when we oh, if I say something like even to like you can always start small like with like your friends or like your family. It'd be like a lot to not speak up and then automatically like go to your boss like, hey, this and this is wrong. But like going just from like your friend group, and even if you're gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna practice what I'm going to say, I'm gonna say it to a friend that agrees with me, and then I'm gonna like speak up to like something that I don't disagree on. Like it is a skill to not go with the flow. So I would really, are you going? That's my mom. Okay. Yeah. I think it's just really important to free yourself from other people's like obligations or like afraid what the other person's going to say. And go on a date. And just do that. Just be like, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and what the other person says is their responsibility. I've worked at like a lot of places where I did not agree, and if you feel like your boss, for example, isn't going to change, like sometimes it's not like worth it. Like your like livelihood is like really important, and if you think that's not gonna make a difference, I don't think that's your responsibility. But you can always like macro social work, like going and doing something else to maybe fix the problem. Like I wouldn't sacrifice like your livelihood for someone who you might think is not going to change. If you don't feel that change in them, I wouldn't. But you can always start with like your friends, your family, and people that you think will listen, and then go from there.
And the first thing you said too about not being responsible for other people's feelings or reactions is actually one of my favorite things that I ever learned from therapy is, speaking your feelings and your, the way that things make you feel. It's not up to anybody else to react well to it. And if they get defensive or try and disagree, right, it's just, this is my feelings and my experience. So I think that's great.
And Brandi and Quinton, to both of your points, I think it's important to kind of survey the situation that you're going into, right? A group of people holding a Confederate flag, like approach with caution or don't at all, right? It just, you don't know what you're going to get into. And be aware of how much you're willing to give into a situation. Like you said, just as, do you have the energy for that? And also to both of your points too, is developing kind of that community again. There's been a lot of talk about allyship in the last 2 years, and kind of approaching your friends, family, coworkers, people that respect you and you think hopefully will listen to you with these things, and having them listen hopefully will kind of develop that community for you, but also allyship to where you don't always need to speak out for you. And I think that's kind of really important, is that if you have those people around you, like you should be able to depend on those people, because it will not affect their mental health as much as it will yours when something like that happens. I try to make it a priority if somebody says anything about, the trans community or LGBTQ+, which, I am not a member of, that I speak out about it, because it's not going to be damaging to my mental health. I'm not in danger in that situation. Am I going to be disappointed at,
Always
the people that I, am having to have this interaction with? Yes, but it's not, they're not attacking me. They're attacking a group of people that I support. And it's my responsibility as a supporter of those people to be kind of that voice of reason, so that they're not in danger. And I think that's kind of where it can start. So that way you can be scared, because speaking up is scary. And you're often in a tight spot because, like we said, institutions are working on getting more diverse people in these higher up positions, like one of our attendees said as well, of talking about, what about the lack of representation and decreased salaries for faculty and staff in leadership positions that organizations are working on. So a lot of times these tight spots come from, higher ups, and you've got to figure out when and if it's a good time to bring it up to those people and what their responses are going to be.
Belle, do you have anything quick to add? We want to try and do a really quick, put on a clock, lightning round to kind of get through our last question, and mainly because I think we could all speak on that question for 16 hours a piece, and we want to at least address it before we close out for the night.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with everybody that the environment in which the situation happens is very important. Never put yourself in danger. I also feel like sometimes one-on-one events, like taking the person aside and talking to them, is a little bit better, especially as an introvert. But whenever I get into tough situations where I feel like I should speak out, I think about being like the younger me and how I wish somebody would speak out for me back then. So that's what I try to do for like the generations of people that aren't as comfortable speaking out yet. Hopefully it inspires them to speak out and be confident with what they want to say.
Awesome. So
I love that. Yeah, thinking about younger you is like,
it hurts a little bit.
I mean, there's a lot of like braces and things that, that's incredible. I don't know. I like that. Anyway, sorry.
So we are going to, okay, I'm gonna share an image with a warning that it's a long bit of text, and we'll do a quick summation of it, or I will at least. This came out, I saw it this morning, actually, another student at ECU that we've worked closely with for some different diversity and equity initiatives, shared it on their Instagram, and I saw it and was like, wow, this is exactly kind of what we're talking about tonight, and an example of an event happening at a different university that is very similar to those that happen at all universities across this country, unfortunately.
Earlier this semester.
And so what we're hoping to do is give everyone about 2 minutes each, because we are after 7, and I know some of us have other meetings to get to, unfortunately. So before we share it, if you all have any more questions, you are welcome to either drop them in our chat, and we'll try to get to them either at a different panel or a different talk, or we'll try and get them to our speakers if there's more discussions to be had. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this and then give each of our panelists about 2 minutes to kind of describe what they would need or want in order to now feel safe, supported in their institution, and to make it seem like their institution was taking it seriously, caring. So just so that it's up, hopefully you can all see my preview screen. Yes? Yes?
Yep.
Hello? Yeah. Okay, cool. So this is just a screenshot. I'm not sure if this was an email or something, but this went out at UMass. It's on the internet, so it's, you can find it. Pretty much what happened is a student wrote to the Black population of students at UMass, basically saying that all of the other racial groups did not want them at their institution, just at all. And it details things, and it's very triggering. So if it's anything that's going to be harmful to you, I'll take it down in a moment. But it's pretty awful. I'm not like, when I saw it this morning, it took me a while to read through it because it's terrible that this is something that still happens. And this happened, I saw this this morning in 2021 from UMass, which is a very a different area than what we're in. So with that, I'd like to pass it off to anyone really who wants to start. But if we can try and keep our answers 2 to 3 minutes of just what would you want an institution to do in response to that, to make it seem like they cared. I know it's tough.
Hold on, let me set my timer.
Just because we're after 7, we would have needed like 4 hours, and we know it.
You said I get 3 minutes?
3 minutes.
All right. I ain't gonna go first though. I'm gonna let somebody else go.
Okay. Brandi or Belle, you can also choose to not have a response because it is. I don't know.
So we're actually asking you to solve all the world's problems in a 2-minute thing. So
Even if it's a quick something, from what I can at least start with, I know what they've done so far, because it was anonymous, similar to other platforms that say pretty racist and awful things. They have acknowledged from the administration at UMass, they've acknowledged that it is quite the issue that they completely stand against. They've acknowledged that it is anonymous and it will be difficult to track. However, they also acknowledge that they have hired some of the best, like, forensic cybersecurity people in the country, pretty much, to try and work to figure out where it was sent from. I know it sends, or it has like a name or something, but I don't think that it's real from what I've seen the responses from UMass have been. So far it's been an email to the student body, at least from what I know. Kind of just an email saying like, this is awful and nothing that we stand for, and we're going to do our best to figure out what happened. Acknowledgement that it's anonymous, going to be difficult potentially to track down, and that they have pledged to get the best forensic cybersecurity people on job. If that gives you a jump off point, at least. We know.
You know what? Since they're not talking, I'm very eager.
Go for it.
Let me start my timer because I don't want to cut nobody time. So yep, started. So yes, this is very similar to what happened here at ECU a couple weeks ago, to which I was at the forefront of in the action plan taken against this. I can say with those universities like ECU and UMass or whatever their school is, when things like this happens, they start saying stuff that really gonna get brushed under the rug later. They probably have a few um, professors or administrators that care, but then they have other people that really just don't want their name to look bad. They don't want to cut black money because people go there. They're black. That's cutting money. It's all about money. So once they feel like they appease the black community, then you never hear about it again. Which all in all, what they need to be doing is cutting some of these racist organizations out at these schools. Like ECU, their administrators know what organizations are racist, but yet they are still here, which is a issue. So they will never get to where they need to be, and it will always continue to happen. And the only response they can say is that we will try to do this and try to do that. But as a computer scientist myself, if they really hired the best forensics people, they would have known about it within an hour to the 2 hours after hiring them, because the best hackers know how to get the information they need to get immediately. Like it's not a thing to them. That's cakewalk to them. But well, how much I got? Well, I'm doing good. Got a minute. I think this is a learning experience for America right now with universities, and especially at East Carolina University and with me, I know that I can't trust anybody to do the work for me or take the actions that I see fit. And so I have been taking the actions. I have been calling the summits and things like that to get people together to let's get a list of policies and demands together and deliver it to the administrators and say, this is what we not want, not what you think is right for us. This is what's right for us. So that's is what we're doing here at ECU. I think at UMass, it needs to be something similar, but the culture really needs to change really fast, or a lot of black money is going to be gone from their pockets. And that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm hopeful for the future. I know that there's been a lot of new talk about a Chancellor's Commission here in particular for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm hopeful that a lot of, these things that students are seeing and want implemented will be discussed, and those students will be invited to speak about those things, because I think it's important to talk to the people that, you know, these things affect the most. So I'm very, very hopeful for that. Belle or Brandi, do you all have anything to add before we wrap things up? Because I know everybody wants to get ready for bed.
Yeah, I would agree with Quinton is saying. It's just like the same song and dance, like, oh, well, we don't stand for this. This isn't okay. But you kind of have to like, just like get at the root of the issue. And if the same people are making the same like statements, if you know where the racism lives, you should go and like do the actual hard work of eliminating that from your campus. It's just very like, it's very telling what people are comfortable saying and doing, and who you hire and where your money goes towards. Yeah, it's just upsetting, and I think like a lot of times I feel like people in power know what to do, they're just not doing it. So I do agree with organizing and forcing the hand of people in power to do what's right, because they're not going to do what's right just all by themselves from the goodness of their hearts.
Which is such a sad sentiment, truly, that you know what needs to be done, or it should be done, even if it's a population that you don't identify with, right? Like I read that as a white, blonde, blue-eyed, and I was like, that if that had been anything about like a Jewish population, it would have, I mean, the responses also probably would have been a bit different, and it would have been equally as awful for any of us on this call to read about any population. And so it's a shame. And we talked earlier about it kind of as doing, an education piece for all of the, non-marginalized students at university to go through an actual like hardcore education of things. Because it's on us, right, to educate ourselves and be in these conversations, to learn and listen, and not try and act like, oh, this response was right. It's not good. And so it's hard. It's so rough, and it's upsetting.
But with that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap things up.
Belle, if you have anything to add, I know we keep
Yes.
accidentally cutting you off.
Oh, no, you're good. No, I totally agree. I think they just think they can slap a Band-Aid on it and fix, but it's something that should never stop working on it. But thankfully, we have amazing people like Quinton and Brandi that have their voices and they use them on their platforms. So congrats to you guys. We appreciate you. Keep speaking up. But yeah, work never stops. They got to keep working hard and actually making some kind of change.
Yeah. And luckily we have you as well. Don't discount yourself.
Yeah.
You also speak up and use your platforms for some pretty incredible things. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and close things out. We want to thank, first of all, our panelists for joining us. Thank you all so much for your candor and your thoughts, and taking the time out of your day to come and speak with us about some really hard things.
And thank you for, I know we all have a lot of feelings and could talk forever. So we do appreciate being able to keep it a little bit moving. We have questions that we didn't get to, and we have some attendees who wanted some more answers. So depending on scheduling and everything, you may be asked back in the future. So we really appreciate everybody being able to speak their minds freely. We also want to thank our ASL interpreters for staying on with us and staying on with us past 7. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry.
To all of our attendees who joined us, we will be back next month. I don't want to say a date because it'll be wrong, but it'll be probably the last Tuesday in October for a traditional Grad Pirate Talk, and we hope to see everybody there.
As usual, this event was recorded, so you can find it on the Graduate School's Facebook page. We will put a disclaimer about language, but it will be available. And I think that wraps.
Yeah, if any of our attendees had questions that didn't get answered, you are welcome to email them to any of us, myself or Zoe. Our emails should be somewhere on the grad page. You can reach out to anyone of us in charge of these talks, and we'd be happy to connect you with the right people if they're available to it. So thank you all again for joining us, and we hope to see you in about 4 weeks.
Have a wonderful night, everyone. Bye.